Okay, well, let's start this session. Let's get this on the road. Greetings, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone has gone to all the sessions today and gained valuable knowledge. Um, so appreciate you guys being here. My name is Luis Martinez, founder and CEO of We the Plug. We the Plug is an entrepreneur serving organization that helps minority entrepreneurs build and scale. So, um, really excited to tell you about our story, how I got started, and where we are today. So, it's a very interesting story that how we got started and all that good stuff. So I will get started on the story. Um, we started back in 2019, June specific, June 1st, 2019, to be very, very specific about when we started. But to kind of take you guys prior to that, um, I was working within the startup space locally in San Diego where I live. So there's an organization there called Startup San Diego, and I was volunteering there for about a year. And one of the things that um, I was doing throughout that year of volunteering with Startup San Diego was really getting to know the ecosystem and the folks that are within the space. So there were folks that were investors, there were folks that were VCs, there were founders. And so through that experience, I got to actually talk to other entrepreneurs about, their problems and their gripes and their issues and all different kinds of things. And so through that experience, I actually got to um, really get to know the people within that ecosystem. And so I used those connections to start building within San Diego. So when it was time to actually be part of Startup San Diego, their local startup week, actually organized their first DEI track. And so I gathered a bunch of founders from around San Diego, exposed them to Startup San Diego in the bigger scale conference. And it was a great success. A lot of people came, but I felt that there was more needed to be done. And so through that, was kind of doing events here and there, and then decided, you know what? I think there's something that needs to be done to build something, some infrastructure where founders need support into helping them build and scale. So, excuse me, as but one of the things that I discovered, I actually founded We the Plug through customer discovery. So one of the things that was very imperative is to find more about, Black and folks in the Hispanic community, what their troubles and gripes were. So I was working, well, not necessarily working, but also volunteering for Startup Grind. And so Startup Grind actually has a yearly conference that they hold in Silicon Valley. And so the first thing that I did actually was I got an Eventbrite put together. I got there on the Sunday, put an Eventbrite together for a Tuesday evening, and was hoping to talk to at least 5 to 10 entrepreneurs about some of their issues that they were having within the ecosystem. And so my goal was to have, those amount of people show up. If 3 people would have showed up, I still would have been happy. But what ended up happening was I ended up getting about 80 people showed up. And it was in this little coffee shop, and it was great. We got to actually talk about access to capital. We actually got to talk about some of the gripes within the ecosystem. Depending on what publication you read, point one or point two folks that um, are getting venture capital. And so that conversation kind of led me to putting together a Slack channel with everyone's name and email on it, and just creating dialogue within you know some of the gripes that they were having within the ecosystem and how to solve them. And so with those principles and listening to the founders and what they wanted, we created We the Plug, out of that. And so when we first started, we actually did research, and we also had case studies on different startups across the country about, what stage they were in. And so we really wanted to make sure that they were in the right stage. And so you have three parts of early stage. You have ideation, you have I'm building, a prototype of some sort, and then you have the prototype to which you're going out and you're seeking customers, funding, etc. So those are really the three stages of early stage entrepreneurs. And so those are the things that we really wanted to figure out. And so we found out a lot of things through those case studies to where entrepreneurs weren't necessarily um, early. They were early stage, but they were in the wrong phase of it. So a lot of them really was just ideation, and they really didn't get to product market fit. They still was trying to figure a lot of things out, and so it's very difficult for founders to really excel to that next level to where they have product market fit, where they're looking for customers and they're going after the proper funding. And so one of the things that we also discovered during this process was a lot of founders were really focused on pitch events, right? Now, don't get me wrong, pitch events are great exposure for your startup and, to really get feedback from, investors about, your particular product or service. But some of the issues with that is that founders can be too focused on pitch events and not focused on getting customers for their product. And so that's kind of usually the downside of um, doing that, and where people are just, we got to get the pitch event, we got to win because there's 10K on the line or 15K, and they're looking at it. Well, I can use that money to build a prototype, but um, not using that time wisely. Now, I will say that pitch events are vital, and you should be selective as a founder on which pitch events you should participate in. I don't think you should participate in every pitch event unless you're in ideation phase and you just kind of want to, you know, do the landscape just to test out your idea. But if you actually have a prototype or a website, or if it's a SaaS product or a physical product or prototype, right? And you're then I would really, really advise you to be selective about which pitch events to participate in, because that can be a time waster. So for sure. But we really discovered that with our founders, and so we really wanted to go deep dive with our founders about some of the gripes that they had while going through that phase. And so I think the main thing we need to do as a community is build infrastructure, which we really don't have. You go to different cities, and different cities do have infrastructure for minorities to really build and scale their business. So you'll hear the usual where they'll say, hey, if you have a product or a startup and you want funding, go to Silicon Valley, go to San Francisco, go to Austin. If you're in biotech, go to Boston or go to New York, or the new spot is go to Miami. But you can be successful for where you're at. You just have to be very selective about, again, as I said, which pitch events to go to, which conferences, be intentional about where you're going with it. And so one of the things we were able to do when we expanded our base nationally is to get different perspectives from these founders. And so that's one of the main things that became invaluable while we were on this journey on building this company, because we felt like ecosystem building is not talked about. It's something that gets kind of get put in the back burner when it comes to um, building startups. So you have your founder's point of view. So there's a lot to discuss when you talk about founders' journeys. There's a lot to discuss when you're talking about um, investor journeys. But some of the organizations that, and I'm not talking about the well-known organizations, not to name names, but to give you an idea, a Techstars or, your high level accelerator programs. We're not talking about that where they're very well funded. We're talking about entrepreneur survey organizations that were started within the last, I would say, 5 years, particularly after 2016, where you had a lot of, you know, Black and Hispanic led organizations that came from, the ground up, and they really wanted to inflict change upon their communities. Um, for sure. How do, yeah, definitely hit me up for sure on LinkedIn. Definitely connect with me and we can schedule something for sure. Um, but as I was saying, that now I'm lost my train of thought. But you know, that's one of the most important things when you're talking about building, right? And ecosystem building doesn't really get talked about. And so I'm glad we're able to share this platform and to show you the things that we go through as ecosystem builders. Because when I first got into this game, there were things that I really didn't understand nor wanted to be a part of. So, for example, um, politics, right? I wanted nothing to do with politics when I first started. I felt like politicians were, just politics in general, they were in the way because I'm a person that likes to get work done. So I felt like that was always a deterrent for me getting work done. And so understanding how politics works, understanding, you know, how Washington and the things that go on in our nation's capital and policy, I think is very important to understand policy. It was one of the things that, I mean, even as recently as last year, um, I was resisting, but then really started to understand that that was important, and so I started going to Washington D.C., going to different events, being part of different organizations to be exposed to such information because as an ecosystem builder when I understand policy and we inflict change upon policy, now it makes it easier for organizations like myself to fund startups and funding minority startups at that. And so we have to understand the policy. Yes, the Fearless Fund is a good example of that, unfortunately. That is an interesting case with the Fearless Fund because I feel like, um, you know, as a collective, we are not necessarily united in that manner, and then that's why they're attacking the Fearless Fund and Hello Alice just recently. I think today or yesterday, also got put into that same category as being sued by the same group as Fearless Fund, and so they're attacking those that are all about diversity and inclusion when it comes to building startups, and so this is something that we have to fight together. We can't be separate on this issue. Like this is a all hands on deck situation. And so hopefully, that resolves itself. I'm going to tell you, Quinny, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Um, and so I had a saying that my uncle used to tell me. He said, um, peace doesn't bring about progress, or sometimes peace doesn't bring about progress. And so we're gonna have to raise hell in order for us to really get to where we want to be. And so, um, yeah, this is definitely an unfortunate situation, and it really affects ecosystem builders like myself, really, because we're not allowed to have funds or infrastructure that's catered, to our demographic. And so that's going to be technically, against the law. So that's something that affects ecosystem builders as a whole. So, we already have a lot of folks they're running to some of the bigger entity accelerators that are funded, but just as there are the bigger ones that are being funded by these big corporations, there's also smaller ones that have started by folks in the community that wanted to really um, be better and do better and have our own really, you know, um, navigate that process. And so, yeah, that Fearless Fund situation is not a good one. It's going to be a dogfight just because they got affirmative action overturned. So what they're doing is they're actually saying, okay, we got this overturned, so now we can go after the funds that are specifically going after black women, Hispanic women, Hispanic men and black men and so forth. And so this is an all hands on deck. This is not something where, all right, we need to stay out of. We have to all be in the forefront because it affects us all. And so the capitalist structure, yes, there is inequalities. I can't even argue that. I can't even. You're absolutely right about that. But you have to think about it from entrepreneur perspective, right? Because if we're in this game, we're all participating in capitalism. Do you want someone putting a cap on how much money you can make? You know, if you have an ability to be a unicorn startup, do you want someone to regulate that for you? I don't think you would want that at all. You will want to make as much money as you can. And so that's where, you have to think about it. Yes, we do live, you know, in a society where it's about capitalism, but at the same time, you have to understand that when you're dealing with venture capital and startups, it is capitalism times 10. This is all about capitalism at the end of the day. Unfortunately, it is what it is. But yeah, not equal results, just equal opportunities. Well, we're not. So let me address that real quick. So we are allotted equal opportunities. Okay, we're not allotted equal results because everyone's work ethic is different, everyone's situation is different. So we can't control who becomes successful, who doesn't. And so, I understand what you're saying, but that's like me saying I'm gonna get in the best shape of my life and I'm gonna run the New York City Marathon. But just because I get in the best shape of my life for the marathon doesn't mean that I'm gonna win the race. You know, that just affords me the opportunity to compete with the best runners to participate in the race and give myself the best chance to win. But it doesn't guarantee outcomes. Not at all, right? You play the game to win, yes, but it doesn't guarantee outcomes. And that's the thing that sometimes it bugs me about the ecosystem where we feel entitled to results. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. We do have to put in the work. We do have to, you know, show product market fit. We can't, those are the days, 10 years ago, 2011, 2012, even, you can go to an investor and say, I have an idea, for a SaaS startup or AI startup, whatever, even though that was, and they'll give you money for the most part, right? Now, yeah, there's some inequalities and they're not doing that for Black and Hispanics. I get that part. But generally speaking, that was the landscape of the ecosystem back then. Now, especially now, the investors are really holding their money and they want to put their money into a more sure thing. And so now you have to show not only proof of concept, but you have to show traction at a significant level. And so, I don't want us to get in a mindset of entitlement. I want us to obviously get the equal opportunities that we need to be successful, but at the same time, we also have to show and prove that we're worth it. Otherwise, we're never going to get respected. We're never going to get respected. And another thing I want to add to this conversation, when COVID hit and a lot of these big companies decided they wanted to set funds aside for, minority entrepreneurs, one of the missteps that they actually did was they did provide the capital, but they didn't provide neither the infrastructure nor the mentorship that was provided for companies to really excel to the next level. So what happened was, a year and a half later, where founders were running out of money or their traction pretty much stayed the same, they complained about the same thing. And they give the companies the out because the big companies can turn around and say, Well, we gave you guys money. What else? You guys were screaming about, access to capital and all this. We gave you guys money. Now they turn around and now they're suing the same funds that benefited, off of those opportunities, which is wild. So, which ironically that comes full circle, with the Fearless Fund lawsuit. So, hopefully that again works itself out because it's really really bad. But this is what we do as ecosystem builders. We're fighting on the front lines to make sure that you know all of our folks have opportunities to really get funding for their companies and their projects and so forth. And there's a lot of things that we see that doesn't get talked about. I can't tell you how many times founders have called me and they couldn't pay their rent or they couldn't make payroll right for their employees or they couldn't um get do X, Y, and Z and sometimes sleeping in their cars and so forth. So it gets real for founders and we're the ones on the front lines, protecting them, but also guiding them through that journey as well. And so, um, We the Plug has been very instrumental in my personal growth as well. I learned a lot about myself, and it's not a game. It's not for the weak. Definitely not for the weak. You have to be strong-willed to be in the particular ecosystem lane that I'm in, which is ecosystem building, infrastructure. You could say some economic development to a smaller scale, but being a builder of infrastructure and innovation is highly difficult because you're dealing with a lot of regulatory issues, right? So you run into a problem. It's why can't we do this? Oh, because the law states you can't do this, or it's limited to this stuff. And so we're the ones that are fighting on the front lines, to make those changes. Um, but as far as we the plug is concerned, we're making great strides to um, do slight pivots in the future. We're going to be leaning more into life science and biotech and making sure that there are opportunities for entrepreneurs in those industries. Doing a lot more local stuff in San Diego. I'm actually putting together our first um, conference, Plug X Summit. Um, Probably the first year will be virtual, and so definitely excited for that. We're going to be talking about ecosystem building, like I said, which doesn't get talked about. Talk about some founders' success. Talk about new ways to, raise capital. There's some new funding methods that have recently been discussed, and so that's something that we definitely want to put out there for our founders of color as well as creatives. I think I can't stress enough that um, the creatives are looking for ways to monetize their hobbies and want to make sure that they want to get paid off of that, and so creating that infrastructure to make sure that they're doing the business right is important. So that'll be probably early February for sure. But if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll have all the updates. If you want to reach out, you want to talk to me, please reach out. Very excited about the future and what we're doing. And another thing that I wanted to mention before we go is that I'm excited about the opportunities that we're doing with Tijuana. And so for those that may not know, San Diego is really next to Tijuana, and so we have a huge Hispanic base in San Diego, and so we have connections with the ecosystem in Tijuana. We have a binational region, and so making sure that you know our Hispanic entrepreneurs and workforce development folks um, have those opportunities to connect with the community in America and so forth. I'm all for that, and that's something that we definitely plan on doing um, moving forward. And so the first year of our conference is going to be virtual, but then the second year is definitely going to be in person, inviting folks to San Diego and seeing what San Diego has to offer and great speakers. Um, we're gonna do it up. So But I don't want to take too much of your time. It's 5:58, and so I can answer any questions for a couple minutes, and then we can get up out of here. So I'll just look at the chat. But yeah, just talking about the Fearless Fund. Yeah, appreciate that. The Fearless Fund is really, really. I hate that this is happening because it's affecting everyone in what we're doing. There's a lot of organizations that cater to our audience, and we all have to come together to fight this, or it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. Um, I mean, of course, we'll adjust and we'll, you know, we'll we'll make adjustments, of course, but you know, it'll be really, really bad. But it'll get bad before it gets better. I can tell you that right now. Just because they have a leg up, just because they got affirmative action overturned. So just for that alone, it's going to be an uphill battle. So, but um, but yeah, like I said, please hit me up on LinkedIn. Um, I'm a LinkedIn warrior, so I'm on there all day, every day. Please connect with me. Um, if you have any questions, ideas on startups or anything like that, please hit me up, and yeah, we'll go from there. So thank you guys, appreciate it. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Appreciate it. You guys have a good one. If you have any questions, like I said, please hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, all that good stuff. So please let me know.